नमस्कार, समीक्षा में आपका स्वागत है। मैं हूं जतिंदर बेदी, पॉलिटिकल एडिटर हेलो एनआरआई। एंड आज हम बात करेंगे यूएस इलेक्शंस की। यूएस की जो प्रेसिडेंशियल राष्ट्रपति के चुनाव हैं वो हमारे द्वार पर खड़े हैं। 2-3 दिन में इलेक्शन में वोट पड़ेगा और आपको एक नया राष्ट्रपति मिलेगा। अब कौन मिलता है, कैसे वोटिंग होती है, इससे बात करने के लिए हमारे पास आज इलिनॉय स्टेट के स्टेट सेनेटर आदरणीय राम विलिवलम आए हैं और उनसे उनके साथ हमारे इलिनॉय के पॉलिटिकल एनालिस्ट ऋषि अग्रवाल भी शामिल हैं। तो हम इन दोनों से आज की गुफ्तगू में ये देखना चाहेंगे कि ऊंट किस करवट बैठता है। राम विलिवलम हमारी इंडियन कम्युनिटी, एनआरआई कम्युनिटी इलिनॉय के सरताज हैं। इन्होंने एक बहुत ही धमाकेदार इलेक्शन में विजय पाई और पहले एनआरआई इलिनॉय स्टेट की असेंबली में एक सेनेटर के रूप में निर्वाचित होकर उपस्थित हुए। और इनका निर्वाचन कोई आम बात नहीं थी। इनकी इलेक्शन कोई ऐसी नहीं थी जिसको अंग्रेजी में केक वॉक कहा जाता है। इनकी इलेक्शन एक बहुत धुआंधार और एक घमासान युद्ध के तरीके से थी। इन्होंने बहुत से अपने प्रतिद्वंदियों को बुरी तरह से हराया और उनको नाको चने चबाए और उसके बाद ये विजयी होकर इलिनॉय के शिविर पर विराजमान है। हमारे पॉलिटिकल एनालिस्ट राजनीति के मंजे हुए खिलाड़ी हैं। शिकागो निवासी ऋषि अग्रवाल एक वकील हैं पेशे के, लेकिन उन्होंने अपने जो राजनीति का जो क्षेत्र है उसमें काफी हाथ रंगे हैं। इन्होंने जो इनकी विश्लेषण की जो प्रक्रिया है और जो एक्सपीरियंस है वो कोई किताबी कीड़े की तरह नहीं पढ़ के किया। इन्होंने कई इलेक्शन भी लड़े हैं, कई चुनाव लड़े हैं और अपने प्रतिद्वंदियों को सबक भी सिखाया है और बहुत ज्यादा वोटों से इन्होंने अपना स्थान बनाया है। डेमोक्रेट पॉलिसीज के ये धारक हैं, डेमोक्रेटिक पार्टी के ये सपोर्टर हैं। इन्होंने कई चुनावों में हिस्सा लिया और कई चुनाव के कैंडिडेट्स को सपोर्ट किया, जैसे पॉल चड्ढा है, ये खुद भी लड़े और कई प्रेसिडेंशियल कैंपेन में इन्होंने मेन भूमिका निभाई। तो आइए लेट्स मीट मिस्टर ऑनरेबल State Senator from Illinois, Ram Villivalam. We are so proud of you, Mr. Ram Villivalam. We are very delighted that you are on SAMEEKSHA today. And let's talk about what is happening. The election is round the corner. Within 2-3 days, people are going to vote, and we'll be soon having a new president. So tell us, which way is the wind blowing?
First of all, thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be with you. As you mentioned, I just will take a brief moment to introduce myself. I'm Ram Villivalam, State Senator, 8th District, which includes 21 neighborhoods in the city of Chicago, from Albany Park to West Rogers Park, Lincolnwood, Skokie, Niles, Morton Grove, Glenview, and unincorporated Des Plaines. If those areas sound familiar to folks, it's because there's a large, probably the largest South Asian American population out of any district in the state. And I'm proud to be the first Asian American elected to the Illinois General Assembly, the first Indian American elected to the the first Asian American elected to the state Senate, the first Indian American elected to the Illinois General Assembly. And you raised a good question. We live in interesting times, as the quote goes. And we are 4 days from what is the most important election of our lifetime. And I know that phrase is used a lot. And I think that the wind is blowing in the direction of human decency. I think that we are seeing across communities, but even within our community, even if you agree from a policy perspective on some of the issues that the current president and the Republican Party has put forward, because of some of the rhetoric and some of the policies, of our current president and the way he approaches these policies and his administration, we're seeing a lot of folks that are not happy with that and that are willing to cross party lines to support Joe Biden. And our first, what would be our first African American, Indian American female president, vice president. And so I think the wind is blowing in the direction of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I think the wind is blowing in people want unity over division, and so I think that's where we're headed. However, only time will tell, and the ultimate. There's a lot of talk about polling. The ultimate poll is on election day, and when all the votes are cast and all the votes are counted, which is another very important issue, making sure every vote is counted.
So, Senator, tell us one thing, that in the jurisdiction of Illinois, which is the community which is a heavyweight community? Is it Hispanics, it is African American community, or it's a mix of everything?
I strongly believe it's a mix of everything. We have such a diverse state. We have, in terms of our demographics, in terms of our geography, we have a large African American community, Latino community. Obviously, we also have these smaller in population communities, but communities that are growing. The Orthodox Jewish community, the Assyrian community, and yes, of course, the Asian American community. The Asian American community is the fastest growing ethnic minority in the nation for the last 2 decades. And so I think what we're seeing is that there are communities that have developed involvement in the political process, the legislative process over several years, several decades, including the African American community in the Latino community. And so just for reference, for example, the African American community, they have 10 African American state senators in the Illinois State Senate. The Latino community has, I believe, 5 and maybe possibly 6 after the election. And so, and I'm the only Asian American. And so you can see that the work that those 2 communities have done to gain representation and a seat at the table, we are in the middle of that process. We're working to get there, and I think we will get there. We need to make sure, though, that we're focusing on the issues that are important to our community and not any individual in our community.
So, Senator, what should be the main issue, in your opinion, in this election for the people to decide upon how they vote? Is the issue the gun violence, that Chicago is like a battleground? I mean, you find less people dead in a war than in the city of Chicago during the year over the gun violence, especially all over South and ultra South. Or it should be gun violence, or it should be the immigration. Chicago has been the sanctuary city, and there has been a battle between the president as well as and the government of Chicago, that is the governor and the mayor, that they want it not to be sanctuary city, and the mayor wants it to be sanctuary city. So immigration is also an issue. So what do you think? What should people consider more while deciding upon the vote?
That's a really good question, and it's hard to answer for every single individual person. What I would say, though, is number one, there's no shortage of challenges that we have right now. We live in a year where the pandemic, the global pandemic that exists, is like what happened in the late 1918, 1919. We have the economic downturn of the 1930s. We have the civil unrest like the 1960s. And the list goes on. And so there is no shortage of challenges, from healthcare to education to gun violence prevention and immigration. I would say that I believe that on a whole host of issues, ranging from the economy to immigration, that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Democrats up and down the ticket have made the case. And I believe that they have the best case to make in terms of what they're planning and what they believe in. Take, for example, immigration. There's a lot of discussion that took place about an immigration package regarding green cards and H-1B visas and so forth. And I would like to remind everybody, look, Democrats and Republicans have both failed us on this issue for some time, but in 2013, it was 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans in the U.S. Senate, led by the Senate Democrats, that put forth a bipartisan package on immigration, which got 68 votes. And the Republican Speaker John Boehner at the time was not willing to call that legislation for a vote in the U.S. House of Representatives. And Barack Obama, who was the president, said he would sign it. So I think that Democrats have a good case to make on all these different issues. What I will tell you, though, is that I think what's most important is that we are able to sit down and have a conversation and work our differences out and come to a compromise. That is honestly the best way to achieve good legislation is through these dialogues and through compromise. And I will just tell people think that Springfield is hyperly partisan. About 80 to 90% of the legislation that we vote on is almost either bipartisan or unanimous. And that's because we sit down together, Democrats and Republicans, and work out our differences and get the job done. And so I believe that's sorely missing right now. Mm-hmm. I think there's personal attacks on people that disagree with you, led by Donald Trump. And I think that is a problem because we need to be able to have our differences. No one agrees with each other 100%. But we need to be able to sit down and work out those differences. And that's what I believe that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris offer.
And Senator, do you play stocks? Did you see the stock market and economy? I mean, Rishi's favorite subject, by the way. Rishi, what do you think of that?
Well, Ram, it's great to be with you here this morning. And, I think what you said is right on the money. And I think it's such a troubling state of rhetoric that has really divided our country in such negative ways, even in our own community, which is, in the Indian and South Asian community. What I wanted to ask you about a little bit was, especially in your constituency, one thing people tend to forget about is we have a very large small business community in the Indian and South Asian community. Can you talk a little bit about what the pandemic's been like them from an economic point of view, what the state and the federal government can and should be doing to kind of help support them? Just talking about the economic status for a lot of the small business community.
That's a great question. And first, let me say it's good to see you again and good to be with you. I'll just add that, and when I should have added this in the beginning, one of the challenges, and I also think strengths that our community has as an Indian American community, a South Asian American community, is we're so incredibly diverse, right? We have 3 different religions: Hindu, Muslim, Catholic. We for the most part, we come from different cultures within India, right? My parents came from Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, but we have Bengali, Gujarati, Punjabi, and so many different cultures. And we speak so many different languages. And so when we talk about organizing our community and getting representation and having a seat at the table, it is harder because we don't speak one language like the Latino community, or we don't have one common bond of the African American community. We all come from different cultures and different languages and different, in some cases, different religions. And so that's what makes it complicated, but also I believe is what's going to make it strong for us, because we are able to come together. And the reason I mention that, not only overall, is because I see that in my district every single day. And that's what, in terms of what you're asking me, in terms of our business community, I represent Glen Avenue, I represent Skokie, I represent Niles, Morgan Grove, and I see the different, whether it's Indian, Pakistani, whether it's Hindu, Muslim, Catholic, there are a number of different South Asian American business owners throughout my district that have the same struggles right now. And so while they may be different in their culture and their religion and so forth, they're facing the hurt, they're facing the pain. And of course, as an extension of that, their workers are facing a pain. So first and foremost, what I would say is there's a list of programs that are available at the local, state, and federal level for both grants and loans to help small businesses get through this pandemic and economic crisis. I'm happy to provide that information. At the state level, I can tell you that there's what's called the Business Interruption Grant Program, big program, and that's really put in place. We passed that legislation back in May to help small businesses through this crisis. Obviously, at the federal level, there's the PPP loans that existed. The reality is we need another federal stimulus package. The state of Illinois cannot print money. No state can. It's the federal government that can print money that we need help from. And so that's one item, but there's several others like mortgage assistance and utility bill relief and so much more that we can help small businesses with. What I've had to do is fight with both the mayor's administration, the county administration, and the governor's administration to ensure that all of those materials are transferred or translated, I should say, into the different languages that our community speaks. And I'm happy to report that they've done that. So I'm happy to dig deeper, but it starts with those grant and loan programs, and then from there, there's other types of assistance that we can help with, but there's no question it's a tough time.
And the failure of the federal government to pass another stimulus bill was very surprising and disappointing. And I think it would be interesting to hear you kind of touch upon the role and the importance of the federal government in supporting state efforts to, in the local economy, and how important that is and how much our businesses rely on that. And maybe also touch upon, there were some good economic numbers recently with the GDP. What do we tell voters who say, well, actually, I feel like the economy has done pretty well under Trump, so that's a reason to support him. What do we tell those voters as to what is the true story and what maybe we really need to think about a little bit deeper when thinking about the economy and who to support?
Great question. So I'll start with the first question. Look, there's a number of things that we can do as a state of Illinois, and that's what we try to do. We've tried to, for small businesses, we've tried to provide tax credits. We've tried to provide grant and loan programs for small businesses. We've deferred sales tax. We've delayed the payment of property taxes. There are a number of things, utility bill and mortgage assistance and so forth, that we are able to do. Again, one thing that we can't do is print money, and that's the only way that we're going to get additional funding towards our small businesses and towards our workforce through this difficult time. We need to beat the virus. We need to beat the virus. If the virus is not beaten, we will be in this situation for a long, long time. And so I think we're seeing a second wave. Everyone was talking about a second wave. Well, it's here. This past week is pretty much an indication of that. And so I think we need help from the federal government to pass another federal stimulus package. But let me also just say this in broader terms. Illinois is the taxpayers, not just Illinois, taxpayers in the state of Illinois. We're fourth in dollars from taxpayers in Illinois go to the federal government in federal taxes and other revenue, and we're 46th in receiving them back. And to me, that is a problem. And I say that because those are your tax dollars. Those are my tax dollars. And tax dollars are supposed to be there to provide goods and services and programs for the taxpayers. And so, look, we're a big state. There's much talk about us losing population, and we have lost some. We went down from 12.8 million to 12.6. We'll see what the latest census says. But we're still a big state. We're still top 5, 6 in the country. And so it is plausible that we're going to not be 4th or 5th in getting those dollars back to the state of Illinois, because there are smaller states like Wyoming and Montana and other states that we need more help. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, I'm a resident and citizen of this country, as well as a citizen and resident of Illinois, right? But we shouldn't be 46, and that's where I have a problem. We shouldn't be 46. We should be a lot higher than 46, and so that is something that we need to continue to work on. That was why the census is so important. It's unfortunate the way that ended, but I'm confident that the numbers we have are going to be good enough to not lose too much population. But the census will tell you how much funding we get, federal funding we get per person, and so that's where we really need to push as a state. Every taxpayer in this state should be writing members of their U.S. Congress, both in the House and Senate. We've had great leaders, Senator Duckworth, Senator Durbin, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, and Mike Quigley and Brad Schneider in my area have been pushing. We need to keep pushing because the taxpayers of Illinois deserve federal funding, and we deserve to lower that number from 46 to ensure that our state is getting our fair share. So that's one thing.
That's one of the things that's been so disheartening is the division between blue and red states in Trump's mind, that somehow it's a fault of the Democratic governors that they haven't done what they're supposed to, and we're not going to bail them out. Well, we're not asking for a bailout. We're asking for our fair share of our own tax dollars that are being used to support the entire country. But let me go ahead and transition back to Jatinder with maybe talking about the pandemic a little bit more.
Yeah, Senator, you had mentioned quite a number of times about the COVID-19 pandemic, right from the day it started last year, March, and now we are back to another winter. So and also that now we are hearing in Chicago, it is being locked down again. Perhaps the restaurants are going to be stopping in-house, and also the bar seating from today onwards or yesterday, it already happened. So my question is that, do you think that the current Trump administration handled the epidemic in a rightful manner, or what we hear is a political hot air of the Democrats versus Republicans, and actually the things are different? What is your opinion about it, with specifics to big cities of Illinois like Chicago and the countryside of Southern Illinois, I should say? What do you think of that?
Well, I'll be very blunt and very short in my answer, which is no. I don't think that Donald Trump has handled this pandemic the way it should be. Look, we know certain facts, and the reality is you can try to mess around with information in the public. Unfortunately, he has. However, there are recordings and there are truths that are said, and we can hear them, and so we know for a fact that he knew how deadly the virus was in early February and failed to really act until March. We know that he has said that his son-in-law has said that Trump took back power over the pandemic and over from the doctors. Look, I'm not a doctor. Much to my mother's disappointment, I am not a doctor. My brother is, and he's someone that I ask, hey, what is going on here? What is your assessment? What should I be doing? How should we as a family be approaching this pandemic? Because he is a doctor. He has training. He has experience. He knows what he's talking about, right? And just like that, there are epidemiologists. There are the Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, and so forth. We should be listening to them. And it's clear that the Donald Trump and some of his folks want to do what's politically easy as opposed to what is right from a public health standpoint. And I'll just add that, unfortunately, he has learned the hard way that what is politically easy also becomes politically hard, because when you lie to the American people, you don't follow science during a global pandemic, you end up in a situation like this, which is the worst thing. If you ask small business owners, the worst thing that they have to do is not close once, but twice. And that's what's happening. And you look at places like Texas and Arizona and Florida, where they did not close properly the first time, they've had to close the second time a lot faster than what is now being considered the second wave. And so we need to really have someone in the White House that will follow the science, that will make sure that we provide the economic relief. This is not the fault of a small business owner. This is not the fault of a worker. And that is why we need a federal stimulus package that will, not only follow the science and say, look, we're going to have a president who believes in mask wearing, who promotes it everywhere, who makes it mandatory wherever he can. And we believe in someone that is going to provide a national testing strategy, a national contact tracing strategy, and not leave it to the states because, again, Donald Trump wanted, again, it's on tape. It's not what I'm saying. It's what you could look at it. Donald Trump said, I want to leave it to the states, so if something goes wrong, I can blame the governors. That is not what a real leader does. A real leader will make the tough decisions and take responsibility for what those decisions are. And I think that's why we're in the situation we're in. And look, you want to make it, people don't want to talk about partisanship. Illinois is doing a lot better than other states. New York is doing a lot better. New Jersey. So it's the Democratic states where the governors had the backbone to do what's right and follow the science that is in a lot better shape. And we're still struggling, don't get me wrong. But if you look at us in comparison to other states, we're doing better. I'll just add the final point is, I know that small businesses are hurting. I know workers are hurting in the city of Chicago, Cook County, state of Illinois. And that's why it's incumbent on, again, us to make sure that we're advocating for a federal stimulus package. That's our number one priority. That is our number one priority. That you and I and others, we get together, we connect, so I can make sure you all have the information on state programs and local programs that for funding and for assistance. And then lastly, you all as small business owners, just like I'm not a doctor, I'm not a small business owner, and I need to know what are the challenges through this pandemic, that the complete challenges. I had a town hall with the Niles Chamber of Commerce the other day. I heard from 10 or so small businesses, and I was able to take some of their concerns back to the governor's administration, back to the Cook County board and the Cook County assessor. We're working on those issues, but we need to hear from you now more than ever.
Senator, if we look at this complete gambit of the political rhetoric that is going on in the elections these days, from a vantage point, we see that the Democratic and the Republican perspective is poles apart. They are diagonally opposite to each other. So while one party, which is Republicans, especially Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, is doing aggressive bashing of China, whereas our Vice President Biden is kind of not that aggressive, and he's not very boisterous or vociferous about anti-China rhetoric. So I was talking to one of the current ambassador of India to one of the major countries, and the concern was that they feel that if Biden comes to power, the US administration will be kind of a little bit softer on China. So when we see China, India, US, our attention is drawn to the Indian Ocean. That is where the rigmarole is completely taking place, and elbowing it out others. I was also speaking to, Congressman Tulsi Gabbard. She was here, and in one of the meetings I met her. She's a member of the Foreign Relation Committee. So I asked her what is happening in the Indian Ocean. So she said that all these countries are trying to figure out where they stand and find their place in the Indian Ocean. So everybody is trying to push each other out. So my question from you is that if Biden administration comes to power, what will be the stand of US vis-a-vis India, vis-a-vis China, and other Pacific countries, keeping in mind the recent naval exercise that took place between India, Japan, Australia, and US? So tell us something about this game plan.
Absolutely. Well, first I'll say I want to make a distinction. There is hyper-partisanship right now in terms of the national news and what's happening. However, if you look at the polling and you look at everyday people, really, and some of the leaders, you'll see that it's not the Republican Party, actually. It's Donald Trump. And I say that because Joe Biden has actually picked up a number of Republicans' support, leaders' support, from the former Republican governors to military leadership and so forth. And so I just make that distinction because I think Donald Trump is, and the reason why he's suffering is he's not able to get a lot of the traditional Republican support because he thinks they think that he's just too far out there and different issues. So I do think that there's a distinction that there is partisanship, but I think there's some part of the Republican Party that will be voting for Joe Biden and believes that we need human decency and we need stable foreign policy and so forth. That's just the first point I'll make. The second point, though, is I think the Biden campaign has made a distinction, right? I don't think Biden, quite frankly, I think Biden will hold China more accountable than Donald Trump. I think the difference is that what the Biden campaign has tried to do is distinguish the Chinese American community and Chinese people from the government of China. And I say that because, look, we have to think about, as immigrants, we have to think about our own experiences. And what we saw with the pandemic is when you call it the China virus or the Wuhan virus, people will look at people that are Chinese or other people that look like them, and they look at them with discrimination, with xenophobia. And we saw that happen. It's not just something I'm saying. We've seen it in New York, Texas, Illinois, where people have gone after people in public, that look Chinese or are Chinese, and say, "Why'd you bring this here? Who are you?" And they tried to verbally or physically assault those people. And so some people can say, "Well, what does that have to do with us?" Well, I'll just remind folks, I was 16 years old after 9/11, and I remember the looks that we got as brown men, and I remember the discrimination that took place and the random quote unquote searches that we underwent. And so I just want to make that point because I think the Biden campaign is making a difference, a distinguishment here, where he's going to hold China accountable, but he's not going to put the Chinese people in a position where they can be discriminated against, Chinese Americans discriminated against, and put out to help increase the hate crimes that are taking place. That's the second point I'll make. As it relates to what you're asking in terms of the foreign policy aspect, all I can tell you is this: we need to hold China accountable. I think the Vice President Biden will do that. I think that we also need to, there's much that has been said about the U.S.-India relationship right now, but the reality is there's so much more that we can do. And I fundamentally believe that a Vice President Biden administration will really embrace India to the point in terms of India being a democratic ally, right? That's the biggest difference, is that India is the largest democracy in the world. And that is something that we, as in the United States, have grown to respect and grown to collaborate with them over, right? Is democracy. And I think that's the biggest difference between India and China. And so I strongly believe that moving forward under a President Biden administration, I should say, that there will be a strong allyship and they will work together to hold China accountable.
Senator, you just made a reference to the brown man and the Indian community and we as NRIs. I must tell you that people refer to you as a rising star in the political firmament of politics in the Illinois and in the United States as well. And I'm sure you must be knowing that when the Indians in politics name comes, only two names are taken with a lot of pride and greatness. And one name is Senator Ram Villivalam, and other name is Alderman Amia Pawar. Why they take these two names is they consider that you are the two individuals who are great in your own self. Why is it so that you fought your election on your own might and you swam against the current of the river to win this election despite having very heavyweights opponents and a lot of mudslinging? I personally followed your election when you were contesting, by the way, and right from day one and how it went through and you won the election. Here, just a digression, I would mention that I have worked with your mother Dharani we did a concert, Pandit Jasraj concert together, she and me. So we have a good connection. Maybe you are not aware of that. But coming back to this Amia Pawar versus Ram Villivalam. So tell us, you are the two wonderful, amazing rising stars of Indian community in the politics of United States. How do you compare yourself with him and him with yourself? And what is the road forward to you?
Well, first, I thank you so much. I appreciate those kind words, and I will say that even though I am who I am, I'm a state senator. I'm still referred to as Dharani's son in a lot of circles. So that'll always be my first frame of reference. I think that what I would say is there's no question this was hard, right? And I really do applaud people like Anamaya Pawar, like Raja Krishnamurthy, like the people, and even folks that ran and didn't win, because every time that happened, we were able to make the case to other people in other communities, other people that we have a lot of shared values and common goals, and we deserve representation as well. And I will represent you, and that's important because the reality is that our community doesn't vote at the percentage it should. We're getting there. It's a work in progress. And even if we did, it's not going to be enough to win an election on our own. And so we need to make the case to other communities, and we have. And I just also want to applaud people like yourself and Rishi, and also the folks at the Indo-American Democratic Organization, from Ranjit Ganguly and Ann Kalil and so many others, because every time we have conversations like this, every time we knock on a door, every time we make a phone call and help someone, that is a way for us to continue to break the barriers and gain representation. And as you mentioned, Amaya Pawar was elected in 2011. He really he served 8 years in the city council, being the first Indian American alderman. And I got to tell you, I mean, he really made us proud as a Indian American community. He was very instrumental in a lot of legislation, and he had a tough job because he tried his best to represent the Indian American community while representing a ward that is almost 90 to 95%, maybe even more, not Indian American.
Yes,
that's a balancing act that needs to take place.
Yeah. Actually, that time incumbent mayor's ward itself. So it was very surprising that Indian is representing the ward of an incumbent mayor that time.
That's right.
Right. And absolutely. And, yeah, and just to build on that, it's incredibly challenging, and you guys have done a great job taking on the challenge to bridge the gap in our own community, because we have the more traditional conservative views in the Indian community, but we also have a very strong progressive liberal end as well. So I'd imagine that's kind of a continual challenge. As you mentioned, we're not a monolithic group, and we have very diverse views and background, but I think there's some commonalities there too. One of the things, Ram, that I would be interested in you touching on is, especially in some of the battleground states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, there's enough of a South Asian population to really kind of bridge the gap from 2016. Historically, our community hasn't done a great job in going to vote. What's kind of your message to the Indian and South Asian communities as to, why it's important to vote? How can we motivate them to go out there and vote?
You're absolutely right, and that's something that we're not seeing as much in terms of Illinois, in terms of making a difference in the general election, because of the fact that we're a reliably Democratic state. And that's not to say everyone shouldn't vote here. Everyone should vote, volunteer, and make sure they're being involved, and even after the election, right? And I want to work with folks to do that here. But you're right, we don't get the same attention as other states do in the general election because they're more swing states, like you said, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and others. And what I would say is, a couple of things. One is, I've heard from people, in our community, and I've heard from a lot of folks about immigration. I've heard from a lot of small business owners. I've heard from a lot of folks that are concerned about hate crimes and discrimination. And I would just tell them, if you care about those things, if you care about those issues, you got to vote. You got to vote. I mean, it's the bottom line. And if you got to vote up for president and vice president, but you got to vote all the way down the ticket too, because there are people at the bottom of the ticket that will impact you greatly. And look, Rishi, you ran for judge, and you made a compelling case, right? It's at a time where we were in a disarray in this country, we needed and still need fair and honest judges. And so that's something that is, quite frankly, at the bottom of your ticket, is voting on judges. And so we need to make sure that everyone just, you can't just go to the vote ballot box and vote for Joe Biden and leave. You got to go down the ticket and make sure that you're voting and educate yourself on those judges as well. But if you care about any of those issues, you have to go vote. And I'll just add this. I talk to folks, and you're right, Rishi, we have this almost generational difference in terms of fiscal policy and social policy. But what I'll tell folks is that you can make a difference. Like you mentioned, number one, the margin. I mean, President Trump won 2016 by winning Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania by a combined 70 to 80,000 votes. There are more than 80,000 Indian Americans in those three states. Okay, you can make the difference. Please know that. I'm going to remind some folks. 20 years ago, between Al Gore and George Bush, Florida came down to 535 votes, and that determined who was president, and for not 4 years, but 8 years probably. And so we have to keep in mind that it's not just something we say. You actually do have a difference. The second thing is, we need to make sure that people understand that these issues are not going to go away. And we need you to get involved now, vote. But we also need you to get involved after the election, and make sure that if democracy doesn't just stop with the election, and it's not a spectator sport. And so you can't just say, "Oh, I voted for this person, and I disappeared for 4 years, and this person hasn't done this." Well, look, yeah, that person should have worked on the things that he or she said he was going to do. He or she was going to do. But we also have to hold them accountable, and myself included. And that's why, it's not just about November 3rd, next Tuesday. It's about what's after that, and making sure we hold our elected officials accountable, whoever they are, Democrat, Republican, Independent.
Thank you so much, Senator. Very rightly and appropriately said that Indian Americans needs to get out and vote for their candidates. Senator, it is a proven fact, the elections that I have followed, that any candidate who has banked on calculation that there are so many Indian Americans therefore I will win, has lost the election. And the reason you have just clarified that they need to not only get out and vote, they need to first get their citizenship, get registered as the voters, and then vote also supporting their own Indian American candidates. I see your candidature yourself, no matter how much we say it was praiseworthy, how many endorsements you got from labor and this and that and so many segments, there was hardly any Indian element in your election that way. So I must agree with you and emphatically put across that yours was the best advice given today, that Indian American needs to get out, get their vote registered, and then on the day of voting, make their presence felt. If we don't flagellate, nothing is going to happen. Thank you so much, Senator. It was a delight hosting you today, and it was very wonderful listening to your political views. And Rishi Agrawal, thank you so much for being on the show today. You have been great supporters of Hello NRI Live. Thank you so much.
Thank you.